All right, we're about to dive into one of the most audacious, futuristic, and, well, ultimately tragic technological experiments of the entire 20th century. I mean, imagine trying to build a nationwide economic brain. And get this was 50 years before the internet as we know it even existed. This is the incredible story of Project Cybersyn.
No, really, just think about that for a second. What if you could see, in real time, the flow of goods, the supply of raw materials, the needs of an entire country, and manage it all from one single high-tech command center? It sounds like pure science fiction, doesn't it?
Well, believe it or not, it wasn't science fiction. Back in the early 1970s, the socialist government of Chile, led by President Salvador Allende, started this wildly radical project to do exactly that. They called it Project Cybersyn. Okay, so let's get into it, starting with the most famous part of the whole project, the actual room where this economic brain was supposed to live. So what was Cybersyn really? At its heart, it was this groundbreaking attempt to use the newfangled computer technology and cybernetic theory to manage all of Chile's recently nationalized industries. The big idea was to create a real-time system to make better, faster economic decisions. And the centerpiece of the whole thing was the ops room. Honestly, it looked like it was pulled right off the set of Star Trek. You had these 7 white, futuristic swivel chairs, and each one had an armrest packed with buttons. Those buttons controlled these huge screens that would project economic data, like right as it was happening. The entire room's design was based on something called Gestalt principles, all meant to help people absorb really complex info at a glance. It was literally the future, just built with 1970s tech. So, a futuristic room is one thing, but how was this whole system actually supposed to function? The machinery behind the scenes was, if you can believe it, even more ambitious than the furniture. The whole thing was built around 4 interconnected parts, designed to work together like a living organism. You had a nervous system to collect all the data, an early warning system to catch problems, a brain to predict the future, and of course, the command center to make the calls. It all began with Cybernet. Think of this as the nervous system. Now, they didn't have high-speed internet, so they used a network of telex machines, which were basically like superpowered typewriters connected over phone lines. They installed these in factories all over the country, and every single day, these factories would send in their key production numbers to one central computer in the capital, Santiago. That data from Cybernet then went straight into Cyberstride, which was the early warning system. This was some really clever custom software that would analyze all that factory data and look for anything unusual. So if a factory's output suddenly dipped, or more people than usual called in sick, Cyberstride would flag it almost instantly and send an alert right back to the workers at that factory. Then, all of this real-time info was fed into the third piece of the puzzle, Checo. That's short for Chilean Economic Simulator. This was the forecasting brain. Using all the data from Cybernet, Checo would let government planners run simulations. They could literally see the possible future effects of big economic decisions before they actually made them. Now, here's the crucial point. You might hear all this and think it sounds like some top-down Big Brother control system, right? But that wasn't the idea at all. The whole philosophy behind Cybersyn was actually to empower workers. The goal was to give people on the factory floor the real-time data they needed to solve problems themselves, boosting their autonomy. The central government was only supposed to step in if a problem was too big to be solved locally. So you have to wonder, how on earth did a radical idea like this even get off the ground in 1970s Chile? Well, to understand that, you have to look at this very specific moment in history when the right people and the right politics all came together. You really had 3 main characters in this story. First, there was President Salvador Allende, who was trying to pioneer a whole new democratic path to socialism. Then you had Fernando Flores, a top official who was tasked with figuring out how to actually manage the new nationalized economy. And he recruited Stafford Beer, this brilliant, kind of eccentric British cybernetics genius who saw Chile as the perfect laboratory to test his theories on a national scale. And the project's own story, wow, it was like a flash of lightning. It started up in 1971, and by 1972, it was already proving it could work, but its life was cut brutally short. In September 1973, a military coup led by Augusto Pinochet overthrew the government. The project was shut down immediately, and that futuristic ops room, it was destroyed. But before it was all torn apart, it had this one shining moment of success. See, in October 1972, a huge CIA-backed trucker strike tried to paralyze the whole country by blocking all the roads.
No food, no fuel, nothing was getting through. But using this cybernet telex network, the government figured out exactly where supplies were needed most, and they coordinated a tiny fleet, just 200 loyal truckers to bypass the blockades. It was an incredible success. It kept the country from grinding to a halt and basically broke the strike.
Even though the project itself barely lasted 2 years, its ghost is still with us. The ideas that powered Cybersyn didn't die in 1973. In fact, you could argue they're more relevant today than they have ever been. You see, the legacy of Cybersyn is complicated. On one hand, its creators saw it as a tool for freedom, for democratic management. But it's not hard to imagine how this same technology could be used for something much darker. A Chilean sci-fi novel called Cinco even explored that, imagining an alternate history where the project grew into this oppressive system of total surveillance and control. And that brings us right to our world today. Just think about it. Project Cybersyn was a government trying to do large-scale, data-driven planning. Now, what are companies like Amazon or Walmart doing every single second of every day? They're using these incredibly complex algorithms and oceans of real-time data to manage global supply chains with an efficiency that's just breathtaking. It's the exact same cybernetic logic, just used for corporate profit instead of social planning.
It's just like the technology writer Evgeny Morozov said. Cybersyn really did help pave the way for the world of big data. It was asking the same questions about how to use information to manage massive, complex systems that companies in Silicon Valley are answering today, just with completely different tools and for totally different reasons. And believe it or not, the dream didn't even stop with the economy. Stafford Beer had this idea for an extension called Project Cyberfolk. The plan was to put a device in people's homes that would let them give instant feedback on government policies. You know, a kind of real-time continuous democracy. It was never built, just another part of this incredible, unfinished dream.
So let's just boil this all down. What should you really take away from this story? Well, Cybersyn was this amazing, ahead-of-its-time mix of socialist politics and cutting-edge computer theory. And even though it was destroyed before it ever got to fully grow, its core ideas about using real-time data to manage complex systems, well, they're everywhere today. From Amazon's warehouses to Uber's pricing, it really was like a ghost of our future that just happened to show up 50 years in the past.
Which leaves us with one last big question. Was Project Cybersyn a naive, utopian dream that was always doomed to fail? Or was it actually a brilliant vision of the future that was just born 50 years too early and in the wrong place at the wrong time? Something to think about. Thanks for tuning in to this explainer.